Welcome to the Mindful Healers podcast with
Dr. Jessie Mahoney
and Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang.
We are here to help you learn to pause and be present, awaken your breath, and harness the ripple effects of mindfulness for radiant health.
We get you. We know you. We are you.
We have both been successful on the surface, yet struggling underneath. We have both had cluttered brains, been overwhelmed, and exhausted.
We're healers who have found solutions and want to share them with you.
Join us here to discover a better way.
Welcome to today's episode on Change Your Relationship with Martyrdom and Self-Sacrifice. A reminder that our podcast is not medical advice.
And a quick nudge of encouragement at the outset to join us at the second annual Mindful Healers Connect in Nature Retreat at Green Gulch Zen Center and Farm in Muir Woods. It is a great opportunity to grow your mindfulness practice and uplevel your parasympathetic nervous system while enjoying nature. And it's a unique opportunity to work with both of us, get a taste of coaching and delicious taste of farm to table food and mindful eating. It's a cornucopia is the word. I just love that word, of mindfulness in nature. And I'm inspired to bring this up as we're recording this because I'm still hoping to go to Muir Woods this weekend and practice yoga amidst those redwoods. I haven't since we practiced there last summer, and I made a reservation and I was all set to go in the early morning, just like we are, because it's we did at the retreat because it's a holiday. And now it sounds like I'm going to have a rain delay from the California storms, but it has brought that experience and the magic of it to top of mind. So as we start this podcast on what's not a most amazing topic, it is an amazing topic, but it has a little edge to it. I wanted to bring up the vision of practicing yoga in the redwoods as a kindness practice of caring for yourself as well. And full transparency about this podcast, this is our take two. We tried to record this podcast on martyrdom and self-sacrifice a few weeks ago, and it became extremely convoluted because we also included these ideas of over-responsibility and toxic independence and all of these habits that we have as high-achieving women. And what we realized is that these are actually two very different concepts. And so we're breaking this up into two podcasts, being very clear that that all four of these, toxic independence, over responsibility, martyrdom, and self-sacrifice, they all lead to burnout and exhaustion and resentment and disconnection and feelings of isolation. But the cause of them is different. And so that is going to be something that I just wanted to share at the beginning, thinking about why we show up as martyrs and why we show up as self-sacrificers. And then the solutions to that are actually different than why we show up being overly independent and overly responsible and how we might change our relationship with those habits. And so hopefully that clarifies at the outset of where we are going. So our intention today is to talk about self-sacrifice and martyrdom, and to remind you that self-sacrifice is sacrificing and that martyrdom is not a healthy habit. We hope you discover that they should not be glorified, that we often are completely unaware that we are doing them, and that they have high, often underappreciated costs.
Takeaways include recognizing and noticing where martyrdom and self-sacrificing habits cause you harm and create disconnection, isolation, and resentment. We'll also share some loving ideas about how you can begin to change your relationship with them, especially through loving kindness and awareness.
And the idea of me as well as a gateway, loving solution to stepping out of self-sacrifice and martyrdom. So the impetus for this podcast came about because of the many, many, many conversations amongst women who were exhausted and burnt out after the holidays. and that many women felt resentful and bitter about all that they did for the holidays and the lack of support from others. And also that there is apparently a holiday in Ireland where women go on January 6th to the pubs to relax, and they're not allowed, or they don't go to the pubs. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but it's a special holiday for women acknowledging all their work.
And I want to give a shout out to my neighborhood moms friends for having our own January 6th. We have an annual mom's night out after the holidays where we do just that. So inviting all of you to set the intention to do that with your tribe after the holidays.
And I actually want to acknowledge that we need those things because we do so much. And this podcast is not to minimize the amount of work that we do or minimize the exhaustion or the burnout. It's to do the noticing up front so we notice what's causing it, and we can decide how we want to show up with intention next year or for our families. And so this idea of self-sacrifice in martyrdom, as I mentioned in the Discover, that we hope you'll discover they should not be glorified, but they were glorified in my medical training for sure. And I think as a pediatrician, they're glorified in parenthood in our culture and in many, many cultures. The mother should be self-sacrificing and a martyr. I think as females, they're also glorified. And if you think about our like sort of huge self-care movement right now, I think it's fed a little bit by these old beliefs about self-sacrifice and martyrdom. And while they do results in many good things, and I don't want to say like they, I think as moms in some ways we do have to sacrifice our bodies to grow a baby and feed a baby potentially, but they are also not sustainable long term. So this idea of sacrificing, serving, giving, and being martyrs, they tend to be driven by guilt, blame, and shame. Guilt that we wouldn't do enough, and sort of shame. That's the cultural beliefs behind them. And so that we do them until we crash and burn. And we do them and we end up, how you know that they're not actually they've gone beyond just healthy giving, is that we end up resentful. We don't end up loving, we end up resentful. So the exhaustion is there maybe because we've done so much, but when we end up resentful and bitter, that's where it wasn't loving giving. That's where it became over giving and over sacrificing.
This over giving and over sacrificing to the point of potentially adversely affecting your health. And so that brings up the formal definition that I found to be interesting from Webster Dictionary for martyr as a person who sacrifices something of great value, and especially life itself, for the sake of principle.
I just want to say something about that because I was intrigued when I read that. And I think we also say for the sake of others, because I think we can use that in a way where we use it and say, well, this isn't just for principle, it's for my children, or it's for my spouse, or it's for my patients. And so it's the over sacrificing. It's where it causes you harm. So that's where you're sacrificing something of great value, which is your own well-being. Sometimes we do it for principle, but we also make it about principle. Does that make sense, that distinction?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, martyrdom is intertwined with my identity and worth, because basically we were indoctrinated on multiple levels that martyrdom earned gold stars and recognition, and that's what we were supposed to do. That's where the shoulds were coming up for me. And as you had already mentioned, it is clearly not sustainable. I definitely attribute some of my accumulated stress in life and martyrdom habits to contributing to potential cancer diagnoses. We know that stress and unhealthy coping mechanisms can detrimentally affect someone's health to the point of even producing cancer cells.
I just want to bring up a hand to heart for that, because I also think that we can notice this and say, well, wow, I was a martyr and sacrificing and over giving, and then I developed breast cancer, and it's not your fault. Like, compassion for none of this is your fault. It was a indoctrination, culturation, and just compassion for, of course, that's how we began. And of course, we, in many ways, had to do a lot of this in medicine. And so compassion for the fact that this is, for many of us, has been part of our journey. And we can hope that our journey forward will be different.
Thank you for that, for naming that. It's not our fault. And I wanted to bring it back a little bit closer to the holidays and maybe bring a little bit more of lightness to the shoulding, with thinking about where the shoulds showed up for me was, oh, they should have said thank you. They should have brought me a present. They should have helped me buy and wrap presents after I self-sacrificed a lot of my time to basically set up the tree, buy all of these different presents, make all of these different crafts, plan, etc., etc., etc. And then I've also been over-identified with the disappointment of others not meeting expectations that I've had for them after what seemed to be obvious acts of self-sacrifice and martyrdom. So even getting overly attached to what someone should do after you have self-sacrificed was also a slippery slope.
Well, and I want to bring up this idea of the manual again. So we have a manual for ourselves, and in many of our manuals, self-sacrifice is part of the manual. That's what we should do. And generally what's in our manual there is what we also think other people should do, but their manual is different. And so that's where we kind of get into this trouble of, if we think self-sacrifice and martyrdom is good, we think other people should do that too. They should do at least as much as we do. And or maybe they just, maybe we're going to give them a pass and they should do 10% as much as we do. But realizing that we have this kind of exchange in there, and I think many of us feel disappointed that other people don't show up in the same way that we do. And yet our manual for ourselves, and this comes up with a lot of people I coach, the things we expect of ourselves are just way more than any of us could ever do in a 24-hour period. They're unreasonable, and they're a manual that would lead us to be burnt out and exhausted. And yet we maybe don't see it. And so I think just noticing what's in your manual for yourself and realizing that other people likely have a different manual, and that's where we can get ourselves into trouble. So from here, we wanted to pivot into changing ourselves and changing our expectations, because that's possible. And not that we need to fix ourselves, but that all of us might like to step out of the place where we're causing ourselves harm. We talked in an earlier episode, very much earlier, one of the first ones, about ahimsa and this idea of doing no harm to yourself. Many of our listeners are doctors, and we do harm to ourselves, and we've taken an oath to do no harm. And so including yourself in that oath to do no harm. And so this idea of maybe we just want to make a change or a small shift, and that even a small shift can lead to huge changes. And so I also have struggled with this idea that self-sacrifice is not outwardly appreciated. It's often not seen, and it even becomes expected. And so the first step in changing this is to change our expectations and change our thoughts. And it's the thoughts that are leading us to the expectations. So some of the common thoughts that I think get us into trouble is that we don't want to be perceived as selfish. And so instead, we just do so much that no one could ever possibly ever think of us that way. We also sometimes think other people can't do it as well, so we need to do it. We very much worry about other people being disappointed in us. They're disappointing us, but we don't want them to be disappointed in us. And I also heard the other thought that if I don't do it, no one else will. And then someone else will be impacted negatively, i.e. children over the holidays. Do you have any other thoughts on common thoughts that cause us to act in this way?
One that just came up was uh, I have to do it. It's an automatic one. It's like that there was not even another option, which is, of course, untrue. But it's become so automatic that I have to do it, like capital bold I.
And yeah, and we ask like if what will happen if I don't do it, right? As opposed to maybe it won't matter if I don't do it. The other thing I notice in that phrasing, and it's so true, is I have to do it. And I always tell people in coaching, like, change your have to, because you don't have to. You don't need to, and you don't should. You didn't, it's not a should thing. You do it because you want to. And if it's something that really needs to be done, then you do want to, like paying your taxes or decide that you want to. And if you don't want to, don't do it, or you choose to, because it feels very different. I want to decorate the tree, or I choose to decorate a tree, or I choose to go Christmas shopping because I like to have gifts for a child, or I'm just trying to, like, there are lots of ways to think about it. And if you don't choose to or want to, then please don't do it.
Very different energy than have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you really don't have to.
Yeah. And you really do want to. And many people I hear say, well, I don't want to. I want my husband to. Well, that's fabulous. It might not be something he wants to do. And notice that many other people don't do things they don't want to do. I think we even think that word want is selfish. But most of us are very giving, loving people. And so we want to do things for others. It's not usually that I just want to sit here on the couch and eat bonbons and put my feet up, right? So I think it's kind of interesting.
But no judgment if that's what you want to do, because sometimes I do want to eat bonbons and kick my feet up.
Okay, so what is a bonbon?
For me, it's like a chocolate truffle.
A chocolate truffle. Okay. I hear that phrase all the time, and I always wonder, like, what is a bonbon? I have a vision of it being vanilla ice cream with dark chocolate on the outside. I have no idea what it is, but I love the phrase and I use it all the time. So I'm going to envision you. I could be a chocolate truffle. Anyway, we digress. So looping back around to what you can do. So the first thing is to notice the thoughts that you have that lead you to that, and decide if those thoughts are, as you said, true, right? It's not true that you have to do it. And it's probably not true that anyone will think you're selfish if you don't do it. In fact, maybe they'll be relieved if you don't do it. It's probably not true that no one else can do it as well. It's very likely no one will be disappointed in you. We tend to be disappointed in ourselves, but it's very likely no one else will be disappointed if we don't do those things. And even if they are, they might not be disappointed if we don't show up bitter and resentful and angry at the end either. So maybe in the end, it's a win. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
And in the noticing of the thoughts, which is so key, is the attitude of non-judgment and also self-compassion for having those thoughts.
Yes.
Because oftentimes those thoughts may have derived from some suffering from the past. And so I think it's important to have those to
Yeah, this is something I actually want to bring up. It came up I did a free coaching session earlier this month. And this idea of using coaching against yourself came up. And I think this idea of when we see these thoughts and we're like, I'm just going to change them and turn them into something else, that's not actually helpful if you think about it that way. So it's having the compassion is what's helpful, and the non-judgment. And when you bring that kindness and compassion and mindfulness and love for yourself to the noticing and the non-judgment, that's where changing them happens with more ease. And it's not done with willpower, and it's not done forcibly. And it's when these beautiful new thoughts that you actually also believe can turn up. And that's really what you just brought up, this non-judgment and compassion around it and softness around it. And it's not your fault for thinking these thoughts. When you embody that, that's when the transformation happens with ease. And that's what's different about mindful coaching in my mind. And that's what's so powerful about mindfulness is the whole like attitude and approach that you bring to living a better, more whole and easeful life. So the next tip is to bring in my favorite question, what would love do? And it's bringing love to it. And so when you're trying to decide what you want to do, ask that question, what would love do? Because love would do things that they want. A tribute to my middle son, who always says, do it only what you want. And that you always want to do good things, generally, if you're really authentic with yourself. But I also think love would acknowledge that these habits and actions are a habit. And they came from a place of love and kindness and wanting to help others. Like self-sacrifice comes from a good place. It's just that when it gets to the point of sacrifice and self-harm, that it's problematic. And to also acknowledge with love and compassion that we end up resentful and feeling unappreciated and not valued. And in fact, we want people to appreciate the things, even if they didn't that we do, even if they didn't want us to do them. And we want people to value us, even if it's not something that was on their list of things they wanted done. And so my thought is to acknowledge the cost with love. So love would acknowledge the cost with love. And love would notice that it's uncomfortable sacrificing and being a martyr. It's also uncomfortable not doing it. And it's also uncomfortable changing. And then love would decide what you want to practice. And this is where I think it's soft. So it's not like, oh, I'm just not going to do that anymore. I'm just going to practice giving less. I'm going to practice, I'm going to use your word, this want. I'm going to practice doing what I want. Knowing that like wants don't get you to resentment. They don't get you to bitterness. They're very authentic. And practice asking for help, and practice letting others do it, and practice letting it be messy and not right and not the way you want, because others never do it the way you want. They haven't read your manual about what would be perfect. And even when you tell them, they still won't get it right. And then just allowing discomfort. We can also practice allowing discomfort, of asking for help even.
I want to talk a little bit more about the asking for help as a solution to breaking the habit of martyrdom and self-sacrifice, and bring in some curiosity to this. Because we all know, like from a cognitive level, that when we don't ask for help, like our health potentially suffers, and also those that you love and care for, their lives potentially suffer as well. So why is it that we don't ask for help? Is there some discomfort when you do ask for help? Are you judging yourself for asking for help? Do you judge others when they ask for help? And naming that this is an intentional habit change, this desire to ask for help, it does require discomfort. In habit changing, discomfort is necessary. Habits don't serve, and we know that at a cognitive level, and yet they are still these super well-oiled, efficient highways in our neural networks that our brain loves to resort to. Our brains love efficiency, and that's why habit work and habit changes can be uncomfortable and hard.
And why habits can also serve you well, right? If you have a habit that helps you do good things, it's efficient and it doesn't take much energy. And so just realizing habits can go both ways. The other thing that came to mind as you were speaking is the Charlie Mackesy quotes about help, and that asking for help is not giving up, it's refusing to give up. And when have you been at your strongest, or the strongest thing you've ever said is help?
That's a beautiful citation.
Yeah. So The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse, one of my favorite books. So the other thing that I notice is that when we are we can actually buffer, as we say, with self-sacrifice and martyrdom. And it's actually the perfect example of buffering. We can also buffer with over-exercise. So buffering is when we do something that is feels good in the short term and feels terrible in the long term. And we do it because it feels good and can even release dopamine. And I'm thinking that a lot of this self-sacrifice, it does feel good in the short term as you get things done. You're releasing dopamine, but you're just creating this incessant busyness. And this, sometimes even the idea that other people need us feels good. And so we buffer with busyness. And the reason it's buffering is that it feels good in the moment. but causes us harm in the long term. And one of the harms it causes is that we end up isolated and we lack close relationships. And so this ties back into the friend episode of why we struggle. And one of the things that I just notice in high achieving women is we really struggle with close relationships because of a lot of the habits that we were trained to have: fixing, managing, and controlling others, and catastrophizing, and martyrdom, and self-sacrifice don't make a healthy relationship in the long run. And so noticing that that these things come from these habits. So another solution I want to offer is my anti-isolationist approach. And that is this concept of me as well. And I want to give credit to, this came from working with a client of mine who is an amazing ER doc, for whom this idea of not sacrificing and not doing it all felt just incredibly uncomfortable. And I want to offer that for many physicians I work with, this is true, that this training of self-sacrifice and martyrdom is so deeply rooted, it's too uncomfortable to put yourself first. Put your own oxygen mask on first, or put yourself at the top of the pyramid. And it isn't that that isn't good, and that ultimately we actually do need to do that to create something sustainable. But that including yourself, me as well, as opposed to sacrificing yourself, is what I call a bridge thought or a ladder thought or an in-between step that can get you to the next phase. And so if you considered yourself and included yourself, that would still make a good doctor and a good mom. It would still make a good woman and a good wife. And it isn't coming from scarcity mindset. It isn't an either or, and there isn't a hierarchy. And so that's where I think it's a beautiful way to sort of embrace this idea of me as well, put yourself in the circle as a toe into the next step of getting out of this cultural habit of self-sacrifice and martyrdom.
This me as well concept is illustrated well in loving kindness meditation. And in fact, loving kindness meditation can help you break the habit of martyrdom and self-sacrifice, because as part of a loving kindness meditation, which is basically a meditation where phrases of kind and loving intentions are recited to different groups of beings, and finally yourself included in those loving and kind intentions, that can start helping you form new neural networks of expanding those loving and kind intentions to include you as well.
And I want to just put in a plug here that at the end of every episode of this podcast, we offer a mindfulness practice. And many times have we offered versions of the loving kindness meditation. And we haven't decided what today's will be. So it might be, you'll have to listen and see what it is. But I encourage you to go back to some of those and practice this loving kindness meditation. You can also Google it and all the words come up, and there's different versions, but it's a really beautiful practice to include you as well. Very intentional and very eloquent and beautiful. The other thing, go ahead.
Loving kindness is also a way to practice self-compassion in a way that is more routine, and also can be quite easy, especially when you have phrasing of loving and kind intentions that resonate for you. It's quite easy for you to wish those upon your loved ones, and then to include yourself in those loving and kind intentions. And then finally, the heart of you and yourself as being the recipient of those loving and kind intentions. It's a beautiful practice, and oftentimes tears can be shed in very loving ways.
And an acknowledgement that when you first practice this, it might feel really uncomfortable if you haven't practiced loving kindness towards yourself. And so many people need to practice and practice, just as breaking habits takes practice, forming new habits takes practice. And the me as well would be a new habit. The other thing you mentioned is these catchphrases. And so there are catchphrases in loving kindness meditation, or me as well might be your loving kindness catchphrase, or find the words that work for you. For some people, putting on their oxygen mask first is their catchphrase, and that's what they would do to keep themselves taking care of themselves. And so once again, this idea that we are all unique and that we have unique needs and unique brains. And so our way out of some of these old unhelpful habits is to notice that they exist, which we talked about at length, and then to figure out what works for your brain. Where's the crack that lets the light in, that allows you to begin to rewire? And a reminder that rewiring takes time. And so sometimes, well, now I know this, I should be able to fix it. It should be just done. And it took you a long time to get here. And so it will take time to, I like to say, untrain your brain.
The awareness piece, the mindfulness piece keeps us out of autopilot. And that noticing, again, is really the key. So it's a chance when you do notice when martyrdom and self-sacrificing habits arise. Let that be an opportunity for you to try on something new.
And a reminder to notice in your life the impact that they have, and this idea of harm and self-harm. And I think that we don't notice that, especially as high achieving and particularly women physicians. And this idea of do no harm to yourself, to me, is very powerful. We took an oath to do no harm, and we should also do no harm to ourselves. And so giving and loving does not cause your self-harm. So give and love from a place where you remain happy and healthy and whole.
We'd like to delve in now to our reflection questions.
Where does self-sacrifice, martyrdom show up in your life?
Why do these attributes exist in your life?
What stories do you tell and thoughts do you think frequently that encourage you to sacrifice yourself and show up as a martyr? Are self-sacrifice and martyrdom contributing to disconnection, isolation, resentment, and feeling burdened in your own life?
How might you break the cycle?
So we, of course, encourage you to break the cycle by joining us somewhere. We are passionate about helping our friends, colleagues, and fellow humans show up with more mindful compassion and live lives that are more whole and healthy. And the Connect in Nature retreat will help you do this for sure. Retreats at Sagrada will help you do this. Coaching is a way to delve directly into habits and immediately begin to shift habits. I got an email the other day from someone who I guess has just been reading my blog, and they said that something that I said there was really powerful, which is tiny shifts have huge impact. And I think that that's a really powerful thing. So tiny shifts. It doesn't take much. One small phrase, me as well. So join us somewhere and practice this mindfulness, this compassion, practice the noticing, practice the awareness, and do it in nature, because it's better in nature. When we're relaxed, all of these changes happen more readily.
If you can't join us in person, join us in community at the Mindful Healthcare Collective.com and our Facebook group of the same name, where we actively every week try to break the habits of martyrdom and self-sacrifice by offering well-being sessions. Please stay on after the sound of the singing bowl for our mindful moment offering.
And if you found this podcast helpful, please share it with others who could benefit. We would love to decrease people sacrificing themselves to the point of harm and decrease resentment, exhaustion, and burnout in the world. So share the podcast far and wide, leave us stars and reviews. We would be most appreciative. As always, if you want to declutter your mind, be more present, and start truly living your one wild and precious life, come find us at the mindfulhealerspodcast.com.
Work with one of us.
Work with both of us.
Start or uplevel your mindfulness practice.
Discover how mindful coaching can change your life.
Or even better, do both as part of our Mindful Healers programs and retreats. You can find links to find out more about our programs and join our communities at themindfulhealerspodcast.com.
Reach out and get started on your journey to a life better lived today.
The content of this podcast is not meant to be medical or life advice. If you choose to participate in our mindful moments, please do so safely. Welcome to today's Mindful Moment offering. Inviting you to close your eyes or lower your gaze a few inches in front of you if it's safe to do so. Inviting you to next bring hands to heart, pushing gently atop the chest. Noticing the sensations of doing so. I'll be guiding you in a short loving kindness practice. The phrases of loving and kind intentions that I offer to you can be changed for phrases that resonate more with you. Or you can feel free to follow along with me. Bringing into your mind's eye or the felt presence of a loved one, someone that has shown you and that you love unconditionally, and wishing this being these loving and kind intentions. May you be well. May you find peace. May you be happy. May you be free from harm. May you be well. May you find peace. May you be happy. May you be free from harm. May you be well. May you find peace. May you be happy. May you be free from harm. And then bring a picture of yourself, felt presence of self, together with this being that you love unconditionally, and sending those same loving and kind intentions to a collective we. May we be well. May we find peace. May we be happy. May we be free from harm. May we be well. May we find peace. May we be happy. May we be free from harm. May we be well. May we find peace. May we be happy. May we be free from harm. And thanking the loved one for being part of this practice, letting them drift off from the foreground of your awareness and bringing yourself, the felt presence of self, into your attention and awareness. And wishing yourself those same loving and kind intentions. May I be well. May I find peace. May I be happy. May I be free from harm. May I be well. May I find peace. May I be happy. May I be free from harm. May I be well. May I find peace. May I be happy. May I be free from harm. And gently refocusing your attention back to the sensations of hands to heart. Taking a moment to notice how you feel now compared to just a few minutes ago. inviting you to release those hands, blinking open eyes, letting the light back in. Thank you so much for practicing with me today.